allons passer d'abord à la séance de purification, mais merci d'être prêts, toujours prêts, l'équipe technique. Merci beaucoup aux interprètes et à l'équipe technique et à toute l'équipe qui organise, qui sont derrière et qu'on ne voit pas. Alors, nous sommes prêts maintenant pour la séance de purification. Alors, accueillons maintenant Larry pour la séance de purification. Merci. Est-ce que le chef régional Yakileya est présent dans la salle? Je ne le vois pas. Si vous êtes présent, peut-être lever la main, mais à la fonction Zoom. Please raise your hand, Regional Chief Yakileya, if you're present. Raise your hand in the Zoom function. If you're there, I can see you. I see in the... Je vois qu'il y a une main était levée, mais je ne crois pas que c'était le chef régional Yakileya. Alors, Et cette main a été baissée. Alors, on attend toujours le chef régional. Nous attendons qu'un personnel de l'équipe technique puisse laisser entrer le chef régional pour qu'il puisse venir s'adresser à vous pour offrir ses remarques dans ce contexte d'hommage aux enfants. Merci pour votre patience. C'est un peu comme si on était tous réunis ensemble physiquement et qu'on attendait que le chef régional monte sur le podium. Alors, on peut tous imaginer un peu ce scénario maintenant qu'on est virtuel, mais on a bien grand espoir qu'on va pouvoir se réunir tous très bientôt, on le souhaite, en personne. Mais en attendant, c'est plus difficile à suivre lorsqu'on ne voit pas ce qui se passe. Hein? On fait juste attendre que quelqu'un ouvre sa caméra. Alors, merci de ça. Ça fait appel à notre créativité. Je crois qu'il a un problème avec, peut-être possiblement avec son ordinateur. Alors, merci de patienter encore pour ceci. Et simplement aussi pour vous dire, tantôt, j'étais en train de vous donner la suite, mais je crois que ce n'est pas le moment là, de poursuivre avec la suite. J'aimerais mieux qu'on garde ce moment très précieux ensemble et que l'on puisse accueillir le chef régional dès qu'il pourra se joindre à nous. OK, donc pendant qu'on attend le chef régional, nous allons revenir avec ses remarques lorsque ce sera possible. Alors maintenant, je vais céder la parole à mon collègue Cédric pour le projet de résolution d'urgence numéro 1. Je vous reviendrai avec le numéro 2. Alors, je demanderai aux proposeurs et coproposeurs de se préparer parce que le projet de résolution d'urgence sera présenté. Merci. À toi, Cédric.
Great. Thank you, Weena. And once again, the realities of being online, but we'll get to Regional Chief Yakalea very shortly. So the resolution we're going to be going through now is Emergency Draft Resolution 01, demanding justice and accountability for the missing and unidentified children of residential schools. It was moved by Cookby Roseanne Casimir from Tecumloops and seconded by Cookby Judy Wilson. So if I can see, if you could raise your hands, Cookby Casimir and Cookby Wilson, just to make sure that you are in the room. Cookby Wilson, there I see you. Thank you very much. And Cookby Casimir, if you can use the raised hand function or open up your camera so that I can see you, just to confirm that you are in the room with us. There you are, I see you. Perfect, thank you very much. So you guys have, therefore be it resolved on your screens along me. I think it's important that we do go through the whereas in this situation, just to honor the children that have been lost and the souls that are being found and set free. So I'll go through the entire resolution. For point A, on May 27th, 2021, information became public about the Tecumloops to efforts to learn the truth about the missing children who attended the former Kamloops Indian Residential School, which had been a matter of concern for generations and a matter raised by the survivors before the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. B, the information has now come forward regarding the loss of life of children at the schools. disappearances, and instances where there was a failure to document or protect the deceased children who were deprived of their identity, culture, and values, and raising evidence of mass human rights violations of national and international concern. C, the Crown's racist, colonial laws and policies towards Indigenous peoples, many of which continue despite the termination of the residential school system, were acknowledged in the June 2008 apology issued by former Prime Minister Stephen Harper in the House of Commons to the survivors of Indian residential schools across Canada, in parentheses, the apology. The apology acknowledged that the objective of the residential school system was to remove and isolate children from the influence of their homes, families, traditions, and cultures, and to assimilate them into the dominant settler culture. However, the government of Canada has refused to support the work required to reveal the truth of the residential school system and has not acknowledged or recognized that this was genocide inflicted upon Indigenous peoples by the state in partnership with the churches. And D, protecting and managing burial sites or mass graves near residential schools will require the appointment of a unique legal entity or guardian comprised of representatives of Canada and First Nations, families and communities concerned, and the participation by an appropriate United Nations agency representative, such as the expert mechanism on the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples or other United Nations human rights entity, to ensure the legal interests and rights of Indigenous people are upheld and protected. Therefore, be it resolved that the Chiefs in Assembly, 1, stand in solidarity with the Kamloops Tissarawak and all survivors of the residential school system and their families, and assert that the mass grave discovered at the former Kamloops Indian Residential School reveals Crown conduct reflecting a pattern of genocide against Indigenous peoples that must be thoroughly examined and considered in terms of Canada's potential breaches of international humanitarian and human rights law. 2, fully support UN Resolution 60/147, UN Basic Principles and Guidelines on the Right to a Remedy in Reparation for Victims of Gross Violations of International Human Rights Law and Serious Violations of International Humanitarian Law, and assert that there is serious evidence that Canada and the churches have violated international human rights and humanitarian law through the hiding, damaging, interfering with, and destroying of mass graves and the concealment of records and archival material about the schools with an intent to delay or hide identification of the sites. 3, calls on the federal and provincial governments in full partnership with First Nations to take immediate action to identify, seize, and control all records of the schools to ensure they inform the investigation needed, and to provide without any limitation the records to the Indian residential school survivors, their families, and First Nations, supporting them to gain full and complete access, including funding the necessary resources to digitize, host, and assess the records in the possession of churches, archives, and held by the federal government. 4, calls upon the government of Canada to work with First Nations impacted and identify and appoint a special rapporteur to conclude and establish a guardianship structure that respects the laws of the Kamloops Tissarawak and any other First Nations where similar sites are identified, ensuring the entity has proper legal protection and takes all necessary measures to address the situation and comply with international and humanitarian standards, including powers to identify all unmarked burial sites connected to residential schools and protect these from erosion, destruction, manipulation, or disturbance. 5, calls upon the province of British Columbia and the government of Canada to establish a safe and confidential process for the reporting of existing and location of mass graves to support and ensure a verified list of all known locations of mass graves, a proactive search for additional sites, including those that may have been desecrated or concealed by religious or state officials, and to establish, fund, and regulate a proper framework regarding the use of digital technologies to discover mass burial sites, which ensures complete accountability for the death or inhumane disposal of the remains of our children. 6, calls upon the Roman Catholic Church, having operated the Kamloops Indian residential schools and over 70% of all residential schools in Canada, to issue a formal apology through the Pope and to renounce the doctrines of moral superiority that the Church used to justify imposing its spirituality and beliefs through a harsh environment without the consent of First Nations, and in particular, to be fully accountable to the Kamloops Tissarawak along with all Indigenous peoples. And 7, calls upon the Government of Canada and the churches to acknowledge that the impact on Indigenous peoples of this policy, coupled with the other laws and policies to seize Indigenous lands and resources, is a genocide and must be investigated and documented as such, with the full involvement of First Nations to ensure a safe and empowering process to record statements and preserve the evidence of these to bear witness to future generations of the truth of what happened to our peoples, so that this grievous mass violation of human rights will never occur again. I will now open the floor to discussion and offer to our mover, could be Roseanne Casimir, the first chance to speak. And then we'll go see Cook B. Judy Wilson, who will also speak. Cook B. Casimir. If you can unmute. Cook B. Casimir, the floor is yours. Our technicians are going to get you unmuted.
Oh, I am unmuted now.
There it is. Cook B. Casimir.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Waipukwaitip Cook B. Roseanne Casimir, the Kamus de Shwapmuk. Very honored to be here and to be, moving this motion on behalf of, us here at TTS, but also, acknowledging, other First Nations too that have found, remains, and we know that there's going to be more to come. And, just wanted to, state that, and that, just wanted to express gratitude, for the support of, all our people during these here times. It's been very difficult and very hard, and duly noting that, we now have to, really have the government listen to us at all levels to ensure that this here is taken care of exactly just like the motion that is currently on the floor for our children. And that, they really do, unite us and bring us together, and, to encourage that this year never happens again to any child, anywhere. So very honored to be here and to be moving this motion. Cook Chachu.
Lal and Cook B. Casimir. Cook B. Wilson, would you like to offer a few words? If we can unmute Cook B. Wilson's microphone, please. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to speak as a seconder of the motion that the Kamloops Sequatman has been carrying the burden of addressing the missing children and the unmarked mass graves and burial sites since it came to light for us all. And that BC, Canada, and the entire world at the end of May 21st, that they were revealed the truth and the genocide of what happened to our Indigenous people. The Union BC and Chiefs, we canceled our meeting on June 2nd and 3rd to give time for people to grieve and process the shock. And, we worked with our chiefs, on, how we could support them and, all of the things that we're going through. So it was really difficult to hear, we couldn't do that today. And I started saying, today that, we do have to uplift and support one another. And we need to insist the government does this as well. And I'm not going to minimize it. It's genocide outright. So for all of us here today, we're walking with this pain and trauma, which requires us to step into our leadership roles and consider what's required. And the resolution is self-explanatory as it was read in its entirety. And it's all our families and communities and the events that are being triggered. Strong people, some on my council even, I've been coping with this for years as residential school survivors, and they are still feeling the stress and the pressure. And we need to take this off their shoulders and show them we can ensure the truth is fully being heard, understood, and dealt with. So as a secondary, strongly support the Kamloops Sequatman and all of the nations in Saskatchewan and all parts of BC and actually in the United States and back east that have been dealing with this situation. There's a lot more residential schools to go through yet. And, for those children who did not make it home, and thank to Kamloops for, guarding the children, protecting the graves and little ones that are there, especially their spiritual parts of that, the whole process and ceremonies that they've been doing. So there'll be more things we find as the other searches are conducted, but we need to work together and set out our collective views here while we're gathering today. So, wanted to just offer those few words. This is a forum where our chiefs come together, and this is affecting all of us right across Canada and the United States. And then now we'll see how we want to, uplift the cultural knowledge keepers and the elders and the survivors and their families, and all of our nations are ensuring that we work as leaders collectively to address this genocide that we're facing in Canada. Cook Shaman, thank you.
Well, and Cook Wilson. So now I will open up to the floor for discussion. Again, using the raise hand feature, either in your reactions tab or at the bottom of the participants list. Those are the way to get onto our speakers list. Currently, I see we have Regional Chief Bobby Cameron. If you can open your mic, unmute yourself, and maybe tell us who's giving you your proxy for the record. Your mic is now open. The floor is yours.
Are we good to go?
The floor is yours. I think you'll have to close the audio behind you.
Can you hear me? Are we good to go?
Getting better now.
Yeah. Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me over there, Mr. Speaker?
Yes, the floor is yours, Regional Chief Cameron.
Okay, thank you. Nigan Manto, Kanaskaman, Miyagisgao, Megwats. Kitim no Naskum Tinoa, Pepito Ataro Spoganaki, Gagisumuan. To our knowledge keepers for the prayer this morning, we thank them for the prayers. To our chiefs, our proxies, our women councils, elders council, youth council, our AFN executive. If there's anything that'll unite us right across this country and the world, it is our children. They say Nagato ke awasasak, Nagato ke uskayak, Nagato ke chasimsak chapanak. Take care of our children. Now, this is a time now for our First Nations right across this country and world to really be the catalyst for change. Because once all the chiefs on the line and myself, once we leave this world, our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren will continue to live their lives based on the foundation and legacy we leave behind. This is a turning point for First Nations people to be the catalyst for change in all sectors that work under our inherent and treaty rights, that whole umbrella. Currently, the situation with the bodies being found on the ground are young ones. We would like to add an amendment, a revision to the resolution, that we would give the federal government and the Catholic Church a timeline. And maybe we make it a short timeline, maybe 3 months. But in the event that they fail to take action immediately, that our First Nations right across the country and this world will launch legal action. And we expect justice and we expect accountability. There are first-degree murderers that are living and breathing and walking, who have done this to our children. They're living and breathing and have continued to live a life. We are survivors, we are descendants. We expect to heal and we demand to heal. We demand justice and accountability. I'm the proxy for my own First Nation chief, Chief Annie Thomas, the regional chief for Saskatchewan. It has affected many of us emotionally, physically, spiritually. So maybe we add that to the friendly amendment, that we give the federal government a timeline. And if they fail to uphold their agreement, First Nation people of this country are no longer going to wait, but we're going to take action. Thank the mover and seconder for bringing this resolution forward. This is one item that will unite every single one of us that are impacted with the recent findings. I want to say this on a lasting note. We tried to put ourselves in the eyes and the minds of these children being found in the ground, who have waited decades to be buried properly, who deserve to be honored properly amongst our own customs, protocols, and traditions. And a small First Nation voice says, they found us. They found us. Egose, hi, hi.
Thank you, Regional Chief Cameron. Again, proxy for the chief of your own community. Thank you very much for that. I will turn to the mover, Cook B. Casimir, and Regional Chief Cameron was proposing adding a 3-month delay to the resolution. Would you accept the amendment?
So a 3-month delay, I thought it was putting a time frame on the motion. I totally agree with the time frame, to both the federal government as well as to the church. I definitely agree with that. I know that there is a delegation that is going in December to the Vatican to meet with the Pope. So just looking at the time frame right now till then, taking that into consideration, it is now July, August, September, October. And so that's 2 months before. So with that just being, still 5 months away, could we consider like just having that within a 6-month window or a 5-month window?
I would go towards Cook B. Wilson, see what you have to say on the matter.
Okay, no, I would take lead from Cook B. Casimir. The Kamloops has been dealing with this, and there's a lot of irons in the fire, so to speak, at the international level, national level, the legal framework. There's a lot of components they're dealing with, and they know the timeline on this. And if Cook B. Casimir is saying they need that 5 to 6 month window, I think we need to respect that. Because a lot of these things are tied in together. And I know there'll be international United Nations interventions as well, but I can respect this as particular to the Canada and to the churches. And I just think we have to allow that timeline Cook B. Casimir is outlining. I respectfully say that. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I see that Regional Chief Cameron agrees with your the way you worded it. So it will be added to the resolution that in the sections mentioning the Government of Canada, giving them a 6-month time frame, and the same thing for the Roman Catholic Church. Perfect. Thank you very much. Our next speaker would be Donald Miracle. Donald, if you can open up your camera, if your bandwidth allows it, and then the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I saw a telecast from Jorge Barrera on TV a few nights ago, and he said that there was 200,000 records called in the 1940s that relate to the residential school. Has the AFN looked into that? And I guess are there going to be records available to notify the families of what happened to their loved ones? From the time that the federal government operated the residential school, I had my grandfather's sister died at one of them, and her body was never returned to Tananayga for burial. So I'd like to know what do we know from the National Center from Truth and Reconciliation, because I understand that the governments have worked with that organization with these records. And so I think there should be something about the accountability aspect of that. The federal government there needs to be somebody tasked with the responsibility to be accountable for what's in those archival records.
Perfect. Thank you, Chief Miracle. Would you like to propose it as an amendment or just as a general question on the subject?
Well, just as a general question at this point in time, but if the AFN doesn't know the answer to the question, then I would like to propose a friendly amendment that there be a government person identified to be the person that's held accountable for providing information on this subject matter.
Perfect. Thank you. I will check with our technical staff to see what we can get as an answer. And just to finalize the amendment that was mentioned by Regional Chief Bobby Cameron with proxy, our resolutions committee is suggesting on, therefore be it resolved number 3, calls on the federal and provincial governments in full partnership with First Nations. At the end of that paragraph to add, a 6-month time frame will be given to governments and the Catholic Church to respond. Would that be reasonable language for Cook v. Casimir? And are there other areas that you would prefer the writing be added?
So I think with in the therefore is the number 3 right at the end, having that plainly and simply stated, the 6-month time frame for both the government and the Catholic Church is very plain and simple, and would definitely give the mandate to move that forward, and to also follow up with for all of us to be following up with correspondence and holding them to account with those timeframes.
All right, thank you, Cook v. Casimir. As I wait to see from our technical team, I will go see Regina Crowchild. Give you the floor. Regina, yours.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Of course.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm talking from Tsuut'ina Nation, and I'm proxy for Chief Roy Whitney. I just wanted to say something about the residential school. I'm a residential school survivor. And if you look at what's happening to us, something has to be done because we have it. And I'm getting old and I'm getting tired of just repeating myself all the time because I'm worried about our future generation. So our leadership have to start really thinking about why this is happening and take onus to it and assert your jurisdictions as nations. Don't forget, Canada's got no title to our territories. They have yet to prove to the United Nations to CERD that how they got title to our territories. But if we keep playing into their hands, asking for delegated authority, well, we're allowing them to gain control over us. I just wanted to say that. But our leadership needs to start doing something now. Don't just think about yourselves. Think about the people you represent and the future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crowchild. And for the record, can you state the community from which you are from?
I said Tsuut'ina Nation.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We'll go to, I think, one final speaker, seeing the time. So if I can have Byron Louie, if I could have his mic unmuted. Chief Louie, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to open up my camera, but I can't, but that's all right. I was just going to ask, I can't find a resolution in the package, so I just need to know if this resolution contains, any type of request to the federal government about, going to the Vatican for to seek an apology of the Pope. And, as as a descendant of a number of my family members on both sides that went to residential school, and you know, the very fact that they have never once dealt with you know, First Nations or to the mental health or the multi-generational effects of residential schools in terms of mental and physical, you know, health of our people. And you know, it's something that I find absolutely galling, is the fact that we're going to the Pope and begging him for an apology for and I ask, what is the value of an apology that you have to beg somebody to give you? And if anything, the only thing I ever want to see is us going to seeking the International Criminal Court to bring charges against the church as a state. And the state, and if you look on, I say to everyone, go to the CIA fact book and look at the state, the Vatican. The Vatican is a state, it's not a church. And they have all the apparatus of government. They have ambassadors. They have recognition of the Pope as a head of state of a country. And, you know, and if you look what happened at the close of, you know, the settlement, how the Catholic Church used that opportunity to force concessions in the actual final agreement. And you go toward, you know, of what they've done, and of all the other churches that committed to providing 25 million to help the victims, which are people, you know, that are like myself and other people's, for access to mental health or support or the facts, you know, they've raised 3.5 million. And why is it that we're going, or anything that has that, why are we going to them to beg them for an apology? If anything, I would rather see us expending our efforts to take them to the International Court, the International Criminal Court, and lobby for them to be basically held accountable as a state for hiding evidence to this day about all these burials that are being being identified. They didn't step forward for that, but you know darn well that they probably have the information that that actually talks about these. So, you know, my apologies. I can't find the resolution in the package, but I would really request that if there's any type of you know, action that's in that resolution that says that, oh, we should go to the Vatican and beg them for an apology, I would say that the only way I would ask them for a friendly amendment, that the Pope must come to this country and issue an apology. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Louis. And just as an information, the emergency resolutions package has been identified in the Zoom chat for you guys. So you can click on that and you'll see it. As regards to your question or the issues that you raised, to therefore be resolved, number 6, we call upon the Roman Catholic Church, having operated the residential schools and over 70% of all residential schools in Canada, to issue a formal apology through the Pope and to renounce the doctrines of moral superiority and that the church used to justify imposing its spirituality and beliefs through harsh environments without the consent of First Nations, and in particular to be fully accountable to the Kamloops Tsleil-Waututh, along with all Indigenous peoples. So there is no mention of the trip to the thing. We are calling upon the Roman Church to issue that apology. So the wording in that sense, allow for you a supplement, and then we will move on to the vote. So I see the hand was lowered. So now, seeing as there are no further amendments and with the time that it is, I would like to move on to the vote. If we can have that vote opened up, please, and open the vote. So, emergency resolution number 1, demanding justice and accountability for the missing and unidentified children of residential schools. For or against or abstain. We'll be giving about 2 minutes for the vote to take place, depending on how quick everyone votes. Just as a reminder for anyone who closed the polling window without voting, you now have a new button that appeared at the bottom of your screen, polls. Once you click on that, you'll get the option to vote. Once you click submit, that answer is locked in. So just as a reminder, make sure that your choice is right before clicking submit. Give another 15 seconds about, just to be certain. And I will ask that the vote be closed now. So pending the results from the phone line, I can quite easily say that the motion is passed with 124 votes for and 2 votes against, 0 abstentions. So preliminarily, until we obtain the phone results, this motion has passed. I will now turn it over to my co-chair, Weena.
Merci Cédric et félicitations pour l'adoption de cette résolution d'urgence. J'invite maintenant le chef régional des territoires du Nord-Ouest, Norman Yakelea, afin de vous adresser quelques mots et remarques qu'il devait adresser un peu plus tôt. Alors, il est avec nous maintenant. Regional Chief, the floor is now yours.
Hello?
Perfect, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. The floor is yours.
Okay. Okay. Masi cho sutane. Tutane gonna zone. In my language, I said, thank you, my relatives, my people. Today is a beautiful day outside. In our Dene knowledge, this month on our lands, it is known as molten feather moon. It is during the full moon on June 9th that the water birds would shed their old feathers and begin to grow new ones. From the Dene and all my indigenous brothers and sisters, our original teachings of life is from the land. And it's very important as to my statement today on the truth of the residential schools. And these are our stories that must be told and retold until the truth is heard around the world. When we came to find out of the 215 unmarked graves that were discovered at the former Indian residential school in Kamloops, the first thoughts of many was in shock and sadness, as we have come to know these unmarked graves. It is just the beginning in our people's memory of stories they have told us when we were young, when they went to the residential schools. But we did not listen to them from the hearts. We heard them, but we weren't really listening. And today we know there'll be much more to come. There are many more discoveries in months ahead that would paint one more brush of shame on Canada and the churches for this devastating treatment of my grandmothers, my mothers, fathers, brothers, and sisters across Canada. We, as an Indigenous people, are 100% impacted. And this will be extremely painful for people like myself, and especially for those who survived the residential schools and those who still live with the hurts, the shame caused on by a system of genocide. As a residential school survivor myself, I know this all too well. At the age of 5 years old, along with my brothers and sisters, going into the residential school and learning the survival skills to stay alive. That's all I wanted to do, stay alive, not knowing when I'll ever see my mom or my fathers or my little brothers and sisters or my grandparents in Fort Norman. These recent discoveries have resulted in Canadians across this country and citizens across the globe. People are expressing support. You are expressing support for action. First Nation-led priorities on truth, on justice, on healing, and on the path, reconciliation. We are ready to plant our 2 feet on our land, on the sacred land of our children. The blood runs on our land, and we must walk carefully and softly, following the wishes and the requests of the communities and families involved. We need to restore the honor of our people, the identities of these missing children, and really seek the guidance of God to what really happened to them, and to make sure justice is served, be it in an international, national, territorial level. We seek justice. We must continue to remain focused on the critical efforts, such as consulting our untas, our knowledge keepers, are known as elders, about these sacred grounds, the burial grounds, and supporting our families in the communities in the tedious research efforts, and have Indigenous-led access to technology such as the ground-penetrating radar we can use to identify the unmarked grave sites. It is also time that we insist upon calling a national inquiry to what our people have been exposed to these residential schools, as well as the Indian hospitals, the 60 scoops, the federal day school, and day scholars. We need to demand the progress on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's to calls to action. My relatives, my people, we know the status quo is no longer acceptable today. We will not go back to that place. Now it's time to walk path of reconciliation together across Canada in unity for our people. These ongoing initiatives that we see from each community, each province, each residential school family must be led by our brave people, our caring mothers, our honoring our fathers, grandfathers, grandmothers. They must be done for our children. It is our responsibility so that my children doesn't carry my hurt and shame and anger. Allow me to be responsible for that, so that my children, these has a chance to be a proud Indigenous man, and proud Indigenous daughter, and my granddaughters, and be proud of who they are. This is our fight. Constant retelling of these stories will make it possible to talk, shed the light, Canada's history. Because once we turn that light out, Canada will go back into that darkness. Cannot allow that. The light must be held and shined with Canada and the churches. They have no fear. We have made a peace treaty. We will honor that peace treaty, even though for all the reasons and justification, we cannot break it. I will not break my grandfather who signed Treaty 11 to live in peace and friendship. Canada and the churches must be willing to listen with their heart. And our people, God bless them, to speak again, this time honor them for the stories they're telling. Take it to heart. It is time that Canada is pushed to the forefront, come to terms of its own history, to rewrite the chapters of the residential schools for what they are, told by myself as a survivor, many other people in the intergenerational families, that this legacy is alive and well in today. I want to thank the motion previous to my talk. My heart is sore because what we are discovering, the whole world is watching. It is the Indigenous people that is going to fulfill these prophecies, saving the world, saving humanity. It is the right thing to do that can be done to honor the memories of these precious, innocent, beautiful souls and their families. Today, we shed light on the old colonized ways, the old colonized wings as today in the Dene, our waterfowls shed their feathers. We ask that the colonized ways shed their feathers. We as indigenous people grow our new wings, as so our birds in the mountains, growing new wings this month, the full moon on June 9th, that we strengthen ourselves today. We elect a new chief for the Assembly First Nation, that we fly high and meet and touch the skies as a nation under the wings of God's creation, to stand on our own 2 feet. We were born to be great, as my grandmother mentioned to me many times before I stepped my first foot in the residential schools. It's good to come back home. It's good that we meet today, even through this technology. We do not use the smoke signals anymore. It's good that we meet and we talk amongst ourselves. We help each other in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, in the Atlantic Province, Yukon, and us in the north, the Dene Nation. It is good to talk to you today. Masicho. Hi, hi.
Thank you very much, Regional Chief Yakelea. Merci beaucoup pour vos paroles emplies de sagesse et vos mots qui font du bien. Et pour terminer cette portion de l'ordre du jour, nous allons maintenant adresser le projet de résolution numéro 2, projet de résolution d'urgence, et nous allons conclure cette portion après avoir passé au vote. Nous allons conclure avec la lecture d'un chant de guérison, donc le visionnement d'une vidéo sur un chant, avec un chant de guérison. Alors, passons maintenant au projet de résolution numéro 2, projet de résolution d'urgence. Et ce projet de résolution est intitulé « Examen préliminaire du procureur de la Cour pénale internationale ». L'objet est pensionnat indien au Canada et crimes contre l'humanité. Ce projet de résolution d'urgence a été proposé par Kupi Casimir et a été coproposé par Kupi Christian. La première chose que je demanderais, c'est de m'assurer que Kupi Casimir et Kupi Christian, vous êtes présents dans l'Assemblée. Si vous pouviez simplement mentionner avec le hand raise, la main levée dans Zoom, s'il vous plaît, je pourrais m'assurer que vous êtes présents. Désolée si je ne vous vois pas, c'est pour ça que ah oui, bonjour, merci. Kupi Christian est présent et est-ce que Kupi Casimir, qui est proposeur, est présent? Kupi Casimir, est-ce que vous êtes présent? I'm looking for the mover, who is Kupi Rosanne Casimir, and I'm looking to find her in the assembly. So if you could please raise your hand with the Zoom function, it would be greatly appreciated. Oh, merci beaucoup. Alors, nous avons le proposeur et le coproposeur qui sont présents avec nous. Je vais revenir à vous une fois que l'ouverture de la période de discussion sera annoncée. Pour le moment, je vais maintenant aller directement dans la section pour ces motifs. C'est la portion de la décision du projet de résolution d'urgence. Je vais les lire avec vous et je vais ensuite ouvrir la séance de discussion et laisser le proposeur-coproposeur discuter à ce sujet. Ils pourront adresser plus en profondeur et présenter leur projet de résolution en adressant les whereas, donc la partie attendue que. Mais simplement en résumé, ce projet de résolution traite d'une plainte qui a été déposée, une plainte ou un examen préliminaire qui a été déposé devant la Cour pénale internationale en lien avec la découverte d'un lieu de sépulture avec des tombeaux non marqués comptant 250 tombes d'enfants. Alors, ils pourront nous présenter plus en détail ce projet de résolution. Alors maintenant, pour ces motifs, les chefs en assemblée, 1, enjoignent à l'Assemblée des Premières Nations de commencer immédiatement à travailler avec toutes les Premières Nations au Canada pour soutenir les recherches menées sur les anciens sites des pensionnats indiens dans le but d'identifier des tombes d'enfants. 2, enjoignent à l'APN de travailler avec toutes les Premières Nations au Canada pour soutenir les travaux supplémentaires nécessaires et jugés appropriés par chaque Première Nation pour mener des fouilles archéologiques, des recherches documentaires ou selon d'autres méthodes selon les besoins, dans le but de recueillir plus d'informations sur toute tombe découverte au cours de ces recherches. 3, enjoignent à l'APN de réclamer justice en sollicitant la Cour pénale internationale à cet égard, de tenir le gouvernement du Canada et le Vatican responsables de leurs actes et de réclamer justice pour les crimes contre l'humanité au nom des familles, des victimes et de la communauté internationale. Alors, ce projet de résolution d'urgence a été proposé, appuyé, il a été lu et entré dans le registre. Alors, j'ouvre maintenant la période de discussion et j'invite maintenant la proposeur et coproposeur à s'adresser à vous. Mover and seconder, would you like to address the assembly and come to the assembly microphone? The floor is now yours. So I can see that Kukpi Casimir wants to address the assembly. The floor is yours. You can unmute yourself.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity to be presenting this here preliminary examination of the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court resolution to the AFN. And, I know that for us, we are definitely in BC here, we have UNDRIP. For us, it's always about jurisdiction. And we definitely want to be taking the lead when it comes to, working with our laws that we have created when it comes to anything to do with any kind of archaeological finds within our ancestral territories. And we also want to ensure that we are a part of the process and not just a part of it, but leading that process when it comes to respecting the dignity and the honor of our children that are within our caretakership. And so, that is why we want to ensure that this year motion is passed, as it definitely, it's about the legal, taking and supporting us as we take that lead in there and making sure that we have our laws and our practices incorporated and that they're not just coming in and taking over. We want to make sure that we're taking the lead. And we have comfort knowing that we have those processes in place and we have want to ensure that it's respected. And, we know that, we have said before that this year is a genocide and we want to ensure that all processes, have that care and respect. So I just wanted to say quick judgment.
With this. Est-ce que le coproposeur, Christian, souhaite s'adresser à l'Assemblée? Simplement le mentionner avec votre... oui. Okay, so the floor is yours, Kukpi Christian.
I first want to say this is that I want to really honor all of you that have been through the residential school. You call yourselves survivors, but what you are veterans of this war against our children. You were children when you went into these institutions, you're adults now, but Canada waged war against our children, and you survived. You won that war because we're still here. And that's why this resolution is so important. We have to use the crimes against humanity. And our children and everything that we do, it's our future. And these children that have revealed themselves at this time, the 251 into Kamloops, and then Saskatchewan, the 751, you keep adding them up. They connect us to the children that are here now and those yet to come. That's how important this work is. So I really want to say and honor each and every one of you that have been through those residential schools, or I call them internment camps. They weren't residential schools. You know, from your experiences, the way you were treated like a prisoner. You were treated with given a number, all of those things. And these were crimes against humanity. This war against our children, and you were on the front lines as veterans of this war. And I want to thank you. I want to thank you for my children, my grandchildren, my great-great-grandchildren, those yet to come, because you won that war, because we are still here and we'll always be here. So thank you as a chief. To the Kukukpis, the chiefs and Kumipala, the proxies, this and prospective national chief, whoever that may be, this work is really important. And I hope that you're listening. If you're not in this, I hope you're listening to what's going on here, because this is the mandate of the AFN next, is to move into this whole realm of international processes to get our story out there in such a way the world will never forget what happened. And it's important. We need to move beyond reconciliation. We have to think about redress, restitution, and reconstruction. They purposely destroyed our families, which was the governance of our territories. They came after our children so they could take our land and our resources. I heard Regina Crowchild talk about that earlier. That's what this is about. It has always been about the land and the resources. So it's time we stood up and said enough. The children have spoken, they've stood up in front of us, and now let's lead forward. So the International Criminal Court is a part of that puzzle. We need to get out there and start advocating at an international level for these crimes against humanity, against our children, against you as veterans of this war. So I want to say thank you for this time and this opportunity, and really think about what we need to do next. And it really is about standing up our own laws. It is about having our own processes. We don't need to go and ask for anything. What's rightfully ours is there. We just need to stand it up. Our ancestors many years ago, and most of you know this, put down prayers and ceremonies for us to pick up. It's time for us to pick those up at this time in our history. So Koksham, and that's the importance of this resolution. And for whoever the national chief may be, you need to pick this up and do something for our children and for the future and for the veterans of this war. We call them survivors, but Chief Byron Lewis said, no, they're not survivors. They're veterans of this war against our children. They were in these internment camps and they won this war. We're here. So again, Koksham, for this opportunity to speak to this resolution. Koksham.
Thank you very much, Kukpi Christian. Je vais maintenant ouvrir la période de discussion à l'ensemble de la délégation. Alors, chef et mandataire, la parole est à vous si vous avez des questions ou des amendements à proposer pour le projet de résolution d'urgence numéro 2. Il y a présentement 3 mains levées. Alors, je vais maintenant demander au chef Monias de s'adresser à vous en indiquant d'abord le nom de sa Première Nation ou le nom de sa communauté, s'il vous plaît, pour que ce soit parfaitement inscrit dans le registre. Alors, Chief Monias, to you, please.
Nancy, tätä miskat noga gimaganak, itu gimaganak tagayak, na björkskog, sek, skatsak. I bring greetings to you guys, to all the chiefs, delegates, proxies, elders, youth, men and women. I am chief of the nation, for Pimachikamak, a sovereign nation. And first of all, I want to express my sincere and heartfelt prayers and thoughts to the BC chiefs for what they're going through with the forest fires and the rest of the nations for the lost and missing children that are being unearthed or found through their unmarked graves, and to anybody else who may be experiencing crisis in their communities, much like every one of us. So what I wanted to bring out was that with respect to the residential schools, my parents went to residential school. I went to the day school, residential school, like many of my peers. I come from a community of Pimitsikamak, also known as Cross Lake First Nations. We are about 10,000 band members. So it's a big community. And we had 2 residential schools in our community. One started in 1912. And the other one started not shortly after the first one burned down, and we had the 1960s, another residential school that was erected. Both were burned down by the students that were kidnapped and kept in what many of them would call a jail in those institutions. While the residential schools were in our community, you know, they were segregated from our community. We were not allowed to visit or see them, or they were not allowed to come see us. Many of them would look across the river, and they could see their houses. One person said, I looked towards my grandmother's place, looking for the flickering light that was there for him. And he said, it's so close and yet so far away. It's only a couple of 100 yards away, but it's still going to see them. We have a huge territory to cover to start looking at, looking to see if there's any graves, unmarked graves there. We have reports from our people, the stories that they told from the survivors. Many of them have passed on now. But the stories they told carries on with us, the people that heard it. And we will be looking and searching as well in those areas. I approached the Roman Catholics, and they were giving me a list of all the known graves that they had participated in. So we will be doing that. So I'm thankful for that. But there's still people that went missing that were unaccounted for, and we will look for that. I had asked, post a question into the House of Commons in Ottawa through the NTB. I had asked for that, for forensics to be done in all the mass graves, because if you find a grave anywhere that's unmarked and there's skeletal remains, you will have RCMP all over that place. They will quarantine that place. They will cover it up to make sure that no damage is done to any evidence there. And that's just one. If you just found one grave that's non-Aboriginal, they'll do that. You know, and here we are. First one, we have 215. You know, and we have 751 cases. We had 104 in Manitoba and Brandon, and many more to come. Those about 1,500 graves have been found. And they should be treated as crime scenes. They should be forensics all over those things. You know, and then that these are children that never made it home, and we need to bring them home. You know, they need to be exhumed and brought back to our territories. We found 3 graves of our people just recently that were in Brandon, also in Portis Library area around Ashern. And these people were buried there. The family just found out where they were buried. They never knew they were buried before. So it was very traumatic for them. And we helped them process so they can start healing. But the bodies are still there, and we would like to bring them back. And again, we don't know what happened to these children. I keep reminding people that we have, when I talk to people, can you imagine what those children were thinking as they're laying down, as they're taking their last breath? And they're looking around. I don't know if they were, but if they were, they must be thinking, where's my parents? Where's my mom? Where's my dad? Where's my children? My kukum, my musum? You know, they must be thinking that, they know that here they are, they're taking their last breath in front of strangers or their abusers. I can't even begin to imagine how they felt. You just put yourself in those shoes, and it's hard for you to think about that. I had a chance to meet with the Pope back in 2011. Pope Benedict.
Yes, I'm sorry.
But
I
okay,
will ask you to please.
I will end it.
And put a proposed amendment.
Yes, I will. That's what I'm getting to, so I can get support on this. Okay, so we have this thing, this resolution, but I think while we do need an international body, to an international court to be called and to investigate, but we also need an unbiased international entity called the International Commission on Missing Persons to be involved as well. So they can actually provide oversight over Canada in terms of what's happening, because they're the only international body that does that does that for other countries where there's missing persons or there's massacres or whatever, and they should be involved. And I thought maybe we should include them. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Pour juste un petit instant, je vais. Alors, pour la proposition d'amendement du chef Monias, avant de me tourner vers le proposeur et coproposeur pour vérifier s'ils acceptent, j'aimerais simplement proposer une formulation pour une formulation pour la proposition. Alors, ce serait d'ajouter un quatrième « il est résolu que », et ce quatrième « il est résolu que » se lirait comme suit, je vais le lire en anglais. Direct the AFN to formally invite the International Commission on Missing Persons to work with First Nations to support the work as part of an international entity. J'espère que cela reprend l'essence de la proposition, de l'amendement proposé, et je me tourne maintenant vers le proposeur et ce coproposeur. Donc, mover Casimir and seconder Christian. Est-ce que vous êtes en accord avec le changement proposé tel que je viens de le lire? Cookpee Christian agree with it, and I'm looking at Cookpee Casimir. Do you agree with the? Okay, so perfect. Alors, l'amendement proposé a été accepté par le proposeur et le coproposeur. Nous allons maintenant poursuivre avec les prochaines mains levées. Et j'inviterai maintenant Craig Nuche à s'adresser à l'Assemblée. Alors, à vous la parole. Merci.
Ani buju ni memoka na sakas mong na doram na technician na donjaba gama technician na. Hello everyone, my name is Craig Nuche. I'm the chief of Technician in Anishinaabe, and I agree with what everybody had said, and previously in the mover and seconder, and especially when Chief Christian mentioned that these are crime scenes, and I totally agree with that. And so I'm wondering if we could include that language into the resolution, maybe into item 1, or where we say, that these are potentially crime scenes and that they should be treated as such during the investigation. And the reason why I say that is because, we definitely need to preserve the sites in case there's, forensic work that has to be done. And I know in Ontario, in my community, in talking with my survivors, like we went to, at least 4 different schools. So, we have to make sure that we're coordinating these efforts very professionally and quickly. So I'm reaching out with the other Gimakwe in the area to have these discussions. But at this level, I think there should be identification that these are crime scenes, especially if we're pushing this resolution forward. And I'm in total support of it. And I'm hoping the rest of the chiefs here will support it as well. Miigwech.
Merci beaucoup. Alors, je comprends qu'il n'y avait pas d'amendement proposé. Je comprends qu'il y a une proposition de modifier le projet de résolution. J'aimerais savoir si j'ai bien compris. Alors, chef, est-ce que vous voulez que l'on remplace le mot « sites » dans le premier attendu que avec le mot « crime scenes ». So, Chief, are you proposing to amend the first, therefore, that by changing the word sites by the word crime scenes?
I think for the purpose of the resolution, we say that these are potentially crime scenes. We can say with the purpose of identifying grave sites of children, which potentially could be crime scenes.
Okay, thank you. So I got it well. Thank you. I'm looking at mover and seconder to see if they agree with the proposed amendment. Cookby Christian says yes. Cookby Casimir says yes. So the amendment, the proposed amendment is accepted by mover seconder. Thank you. We will now go to Chief Marcel Head. Oh, and just a second, if I may. I see all your hand raised. I see you, Chief Gold. So just for you to know, we will hear Chief Head, then Regina Crowchild, and then Chief Gold, and then the speakers list will be closed at that point. So the three more speakers, and then the guest, not the guest list, but the speakers list will be closed. So Chief Head, to you, please.
Yes, I do support the resolution. Just for clarification, with the number 2 of the resolution, I understand there's an archaeological investigation, it says, but due to the sensitivity, I guess, of the investigation, I think some of the people that will be reading the resolution will find it a little bit troubling when they see words like uncovered during the investigation. Just the latter part of that, the resolution, point number 2. And if that could be removed and put in place, like we were talking about unmarked graves, so maybe just the wording to have the word unmarked in that particular part of the resolution. And the other part too that I would like to address is the, our people are very angered by.
Chief Head, we're just going to deal with your first proposed amendment. I'm going to check with the Cookby Christian and Cookby Casimir if they agree, and then we'll continue with your other proposed amendment if it's okay with you. Just to keep it simple. So I'm looking. So we'll have to replace grave sites uncovered with unmarked grave sites. Cookpee Christian is okay. You agree with this, and Cookpee Casimir, do you agree with this little change? Yes. So to you, Cookpee Casimir, the floor is yours.
Thank you for that. I can agree to changing the word from uncovered to discovered.
Thank you for this. Cookpee Christian, are you okay with the change proposed by your co-proposer, the mover? Sorry, the mover. Yeah. Okay, he agrees. I'm looking to Chief Head. Would it capture your proposed amendment? You're okay with this change? Good. So you can continue now with your other amendment. Please, you can go.
Yes, just wait. Okay, all right.
So in the chat, let them know.
Sorry, it seems that you might have another microphone open. So I would ask you to please close or mute every other microphone. There's a lot of echo there. It was okay at the first time, so.
Right, can you hear me?
I think yes, it's okay. Thank you.
Okay, just in regards to the resolution again, I don't know if there's wording that captures the ongoing anger and bitterness portrayed by our own people across the country. I would like to, at some point, have this addressed, because it's really troubling, when you see our people, getting hostile to other historical monuments. I don't think it's necessary to take down a monument, just to protest, how much anger there is with our people. So I think that has to be addressed to as well with the Assembly, and each of the First Nations chiefs, leaders, councillors, have to address this at some point. It's disheartening, to see in the news, churches being burnt and monuments being overturned. I think that's not the way. I've heard chiefs call and voice their concern about this, and also that the fact that the elders have not taught to be bitter or anger towards the past mistreatment of our people. I know it's something very troubling when you're starting to find unmarked graves. It's, but I don't think we have to get mad over it. And I know that there are ways to deal with anger and bitterness, and just people need our professional help. If you're angry about the recent findings and discoveries of the unmarked graves. So that is something that I want to address too as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for for all the information and the message you shared. I'm now looking at Regina Crowchild. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask the mover and the seconder if they would consider an amendment to include the Imperial Crown and with the Government of Canada and the Vatican, because it is the Imperial Crown, the sovereign over there, that directed or is the head of state for Canada. And so I just wanted to ask if they could include that, because the Crown has to take some responsibility for us. You know, they can't just say the government of Canada is responsible. They initiated this. They had the Royal Proclamation. They enacted the British North America Act, and from there came the Indian Act and the residential schools. So I just want to ask the mover and the seconder if they would kindly consider that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this. So I'm looking at mover and seconder to check if they agree to add the imperial crown to the with the Vatican and sorry, I don't have the. So yes, to add the imperial crown. So I'm looking at Cookpee Christian and Cookpee Casimir. Cookpee Casimir says yes. I think it's a yes. Thank you. And Cookpee Christian, this is a yes. So your proposed amendment is accepted by mover and seconder. Thank you for this. So now, as I told you just a bit before, I closed the speakers list at the final person on the speakers list. So the last person to speak on this specific project, draft resolution is Chief Gold. So Chief Gold, to you.
Hello. Well, Alan, thank you. As Chief Roddy Gould, I want to speak my support to this resolution. I think it's important that this be at the International Criminal Court. I speak on behalf of my deceased father, who is a survivor of a residential school. I am honored to, and I want to go on the record as supporting this. But I want to also caution one of the recommendations. I also agree that this is a crime scene, but we have to be cautious of how we limit our jurisdictional responsibility to the people who are responsible. I think that the word crime scene should be included in it, but don't let it be limiting or limit people from their involvement in the criminal investigation. If somebody can say that a place marker was there at such and such a time is no longer a criminal element, I think we just have to be cautious, and it might seem like legal semantics, but I think it's important that we don't allow the federal government to continuously push the ball down the field and let somebody else play the game. I think that we have to hold them accountable. I think platitudes for a day of reconciliation to an orange shirt day is a joke. I think that we should make our voices concerned. And as the leadership, I think we have to become the orange shirt generation, not just one day. So I really support this resolution, and I think that all chiefs in the region should. And I think the wording has to be specific to be inclusive to all parties involved. And we as First Nation leadership should hold everyone responsibility without giving them any outs. Well, Alan, thank you.
Merci pour ceci. Est-ce que vous avez une proposition d'amendement spécifique à faire? Si vous pouviez proposer un amendement ou si c'était simplement un commentaire. Simplement me confirmer.
Yeah, there was an amendment to include the word crime scene. And I think that was accepted, and that's what I would like to caution. I would like to make sure that the semantics are important. The legal semantics would not give somebody an out. The correlation would be a day school or a residential school. It gives legal responsibility an out if there is such a thing. So I just wanted to caution the amendment for the crime scene. I believe it was a crime scene, but I think it should be worded in a way which doesn't give any jurisdictional responsibility an easy out.
Merci pour ceci. Je regarde le proposeur et coproposeur pour m'assurer qu'ils sont corrects avec la proposition d'amendement qui a été acceptée en gardant en tête votre conseil et votre commentaire. Alors, proposeur et coproposeur, est-ce que vous êtes toujours confortable avec la proposition de changer le terme pour crime scenes à la lumière du commentaire qu'on vient d'avoir du chef Gold? Cookpee Christian, you're okay with this? You're still okay, or you want to speak?
What I would like to propose, if you just put it up on the screen and read it, because there's a number of amendments. We've got to be clear on what has actually been amended. And then I have no problem with that, but I need to see it because it's hard to keep track of where it was amended, what words were changed, etc. But I have no problem with the amendments. I just think we need to see it. Okay, that's all I'm worried about. Cookstrom. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you so much. Cookby, Casimir, if you're okay with this, I propose something. I propose to reread everything with the proposed amendments that have been accepted. Sorry, I have someone here that is calling for me. I wish my cat wouldn't be loud, so sorry. And I'm gonna reread this, but I'm not sure if we could now. We cannot put the changes up, but I'm gonna reread it slowly. Therefore be it resolved that the chiefs in assembly direct the Assembly of First Nations to immediately begin work with all First Nations in Canada to support the investigation of former Indian residential school sites with the purpose of identifying grave sites of children which could potentially be crime scenes. Second, I'm sorry, just want to be sure that the resolution team, the second one has been, is not there, but okay. So second one, direct the AFN to work with all First Nations in Canada to support additional works as required and considered appropriate by each First Nation to conduct archaeological investigations, document research, and other such methods of investigations as required to collect more information about any grave sites discovered during the investigation. I see you, Chief. I propose just to finish to read it, and then I'll go to you because I can see you have a comment to make, but just give me a moment. Third one, direct the AFN to seek justice through intervention at the International Criminal Court in this matter to hold the Crown, the Government of Canada, and the Vatican. I note here that it was suggested to include the Imperial Crown, but we thought the resolution committee thought that you were referring to the Crown as an whole. So we suggest to put here the Crown, so it includes every crown. And so I continue to read it. So hold the Crown, Government of Canada, and the Vatican accountable for their actions and to seek justice for the crimes against humanity, for the victims' family, and the international community. And the last one, direct the AFN to formally invite the International Commission of Missing Persons to work with First Nations to oversee the work as part of an international entity. I'm now looking at Chief Gold, and you can have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that. I was just trying to simplify it by going specifically to number one. I think it's easier to do it that way. To direct the Assembly of First Nations immediately begin. The wording should be the former Indian residential school crime scenes are right there, rather than putting it at the end, which identifies the way you worded it there, the identifying grave sites of children at crime scenes. So they're saying that, like, say if the Shubenacadie Residential School says we had place markers and we don't deem that as a crime scene, so we don't want warranting in further investigation. So that takes that off the table. I think that the wording it may seem like it's semantics, but I think it should be included that it is a crime scene, but we should identify where it is. All Indian residential schools have a potential to be a crime scene, period. So I think the wording should reflect on that. That would be my only suggestion.
Okay, thank you, Chief Gold. I'm virtually looking at the resolutions committee to make sure they captured your proposed amendment, rewording, and I'm going to reread it as soon as I have their confirmation. question for you, Chief Gold, just to make sure we captured the wording accordingly. So are you requesting to put crime scenes after Indian residential school and remove it from the end of the first?
Yes, yes, yes. The original amendment was to add it, and I think it should be added there instead of there. That was my suggestion.
Thank you. So no change, just a change
Where?
of, yes, just
Exactly.
the where. Good,
Right.
good, thank you. So I'm looking to the mover and the seconder. Mover, Cookpee Casimir, seconder Christian. Do you agree with this wording of the first, therefore be it resolved? Cookpee Christian, yes. And Cookpee Casimir wants to address the assembly. So it's your turn. You can go, the floor is yours, Cookpee Casimir.
All right, Cook's Jam. Yes, I definitely agree with that statement. And, I think that it should definitely be in there and changing its location. I know that, first and foremost, we have the levels of government as well as the RCMP working with us. And we're definitely taking the lead on that. And they're following our community's laws. And, we want to also ensure that our sites are protected. And I think all First Nations who have found sites as well should be protecting it and criminalizing anyone that may try to damage or even trespass. Because we do not want any of the evidence to be tampered with until we get to that point. And, I know that, we're just at the beginning stages, but that's something that we've definitely put out there as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much for this, Cookpee Casimir. As I told you, we closed the speakers list. So the final speaker or chief has addressed the assembly, but I now see that Chief Crowchild, Regina Crowchild, maybe wants to add something. So I'm gonna turn the floor just to make sure that we can hear her. Crowchild, to you.
Wait, I can't. Oh yeah, can you hear me? Okay, it's the imperial crown I'm talking about. Not the crown. I don't want the crown in right of Canada. I don't want the Governor General, but it's the crown, the Queen that I want. I'm suggesting to put in there. But on another note, I just want to clarify. The AFN is not a rights holder. It has to be the rights holders who are First Nations that go to court. So that has to be looked at. I'm just a little concerned, and I've received some comments. AFN, we cannot look at AFN themselves going to court, but it says there to immediately begin work with the First Nations. So I had assumed it's going to be the First Nations that are going to go to the international court. I wanted to raise that because AFN is not a rights holder. It's just an organization, an advocacy organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this. Can you hear me in echo everywhere? So maybe someone. Okay. Thank you. So first thing, I understand that you have you specified your amendment. I'm going to deal with this, but for the other part of what you mentioned, we just took note of what you said, and so that has been dealt with. So for the imperial crown, since mover and seconder accepted the crown, I'm going to look at them for last time and check with them if maybe what we could do. So we could either replace and put imperial crown or put crown and comma, including imperial crown, just to make sure we cover everyone. So if you can please confirm if you wish to, which option you prefer. Cookpee Christian, to you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I understand clearly where Regina is coming from, because the origins, and we got to remember this, we are here long before these people showed up. The first people that showed up was the Imperial Crown in the right of Britain at the time. And that was that whole, you know, we all know the history, right? The Royal Proclamation and then the Treaty of Niagara, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I have no problem with that language. It's very clear because we also have stories about the Queen and children. And that's some of the things that have come out in this sort of the discussion. The truth is coming out about the royal family's interaction at these places and what they did. So I think we have to put it in there. I think it's really important. So I appreciate that, Regina. I understand completely. And you're right, it's not the AFN are not the rights holders. It is the us in the communities that are the rights holders. It's just an organization. But as a national organization, they have a responsibility to help us open those doors so we can go through them. That's their job. And I think it's really important, especially the national chief. That's the role they need to play. Open those doors so our communities and nations can walk through. It's not them, it's us. So I really want to be clear about that. So thanks for the clarification. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Christian. So if I understood correctly what you said, you want to keep only the Imperial Crown and not the crown as a whole. So only the Imperial Crown. Thank you for this. Thank you. Kokpi Casimir, are you okay with this? Yes, thank you. So I think we arrive at the end of this amended draft resolution, emergency draft resolution. The period of discussion has now ended. It's closed, and we're going to vote. So to call for a vote on the emergency draft resolution number 2, entitled Preliminary Examination of the Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. Alors maintenant, I'm sorry for the translator, I just switched to French, mais je vais continuer en français. Alors maintenant, je demande la période du vote d'être ouverte et si vous pouviez maintenant mettre à l'écran l'écran de vote. J'encourage tous les chefs et mandataires à partir de maintenant d'enregistrer leur vote. C'est maintenant le vote sur le projet de résolution urgente numéro 2. Et je vois qu'il y a beaucoup de personnes qui sont en train de voter. Merci pour ceci. Je rappelle aussi que si jamais vous perdez la page ou l'écran, pardon, de vote, toujours possible de la récupérer. C'est dans le bouton au bas qui est marqué Poll, donc sondage. Il faut recliquer sur ceci et la fenêtre va rouvrir. Sauf que si vous avez entré votre vote, c'est terminé. Vous ne pouvez pas revoter une deuxième fois, évidemment. Alors, nous allons encore poursuivre un peu la période de vote. Je vois qu'il y a encore des votes qui sont entrés, alors on poursuit. Et il y a un énorme merci à tous pendant qu'on est en train de voter. C'est beaucoup de concentration pour tout le monde et une grande participation. C'est extrêmement apprécié. Merci beaucoup et merci aux proposeurs et coproposeurs aussi parce que vous avez eu une participation qui était exemplaire et c'était formidable de pouvoir échanger comme ça de façon virtuelle et d'arriver à un projet de résolution modifié qui peut être présenté à l'Assemblée. Merci. Et je vois dans les commentaires qu'on a vu mon chat. Désolée pour ça. OK. Alors, on va garder encore 15 secondes de vote. So 15 seconds left for the voting period. No, you're still voting, so I don't want to interrupt something as important as what we're doing now. So just make sure that everyone has a possibility to vote. Et simplement vous informer pendant le vote que je crois comprendre que c'est mon collègue Harold qui va poursuivre après, si je ne me trompe pas. Harold, est-ce que juste avec un signe de la tête, est-ce que c'est toi qui vas poursuivre après? Harold, are you the one on deck? Yes. OK, so ce sera Harold qui va continuer après. Pour terminer ce que nous avons à l'agenda avant d'introduire le chef électoral des élections.
Thank you very much, Wina.
I'm not finished. I don't know if you're on with your French translation or not, but I'm not finished yet. But do you want to say something while the voting period is still on, or?
Well, thank you very much, Wina. I think you can wrap that up. It's 100% in favor as far as I can see.
Perfect. So I have Harold's agreement to close the vote. So if you can please, I ask now for closing the vote. So please, can you share the preliminary result? Because this doesn't include the phone votes. But as you can see now, 100% of the 117 chiefs that voted. So for this draft resolution. So thank you very much. Congratulations. I'm pretty sure the phone votes won't change that result. So we can assume that this resolution has passed, but we'll confirm it later on, the final result. So thank you, everyone. I now turn the floor over to my colleague, Harold Tarbell. To you, Harold.
Thank you very much, Wina. Appreciate that. Chiefs and proxies, I do want to note the time. We're 10 minutes just coming up on 5 p.m. Eastern time, 6 p.m. Atlantic and Maritime time, and 2 p.m. Pacific time. And time zones affect us all a little bit differently, but we are going to keep that in mind. We do have two pieces of assembly business to address, which are the charter resolutions, and there's language in the charter and in our rules that we need to deal with them on the first day. We have two charter amendments in your package of draft resolutions, draft resolution 1 and draft resolution 2. I would note that given the time, we of course then now are going to be extending the start time of the candidates forum. And we do want to make sure that we provide a transition time for people to get some nutrition as well. And so we will, following the conclusion of these two resolutions, we will introduce and turn the proceedings over to the Chief Electoral Officer. And he will guide us relative to the time frame that he's worked out with the candidates for the remainder of your evening and through to the vote. With that, then let us turn our attention to draft resolution number 1, the clarification of the designated representative and proxy. We do have a short video, about 5 minutes, from the technical support, legal and technical support for the Chiefs Committee on Charter Renewal, and so on each resolution. So we'll show that first one. We could show that first first video now, please. So Encore, let's shift over to the video for the first draft resolution with Bhavani Leonard and Casey Godfredson. Although I'm showing it as a 2-minute and 47-second video. Perhaps a little word from Encore.
designated representative
Chat for us.
proxy. Hello, proxies. My name is Casey Goffertson, and I've been working alongside Bonnie Leonard and the Chiefs Committee on Charter Renewal to develop amendments to the AFN Charter. The AFN Charter is one of the governing documents for AFN. The language in the Charter regarding the description of quorum for decision-making is inconsistent between Articles 2 and 8. The wording between the two provisions in the Charter is unclear. Specifically, the words "in attendance" and the difference between a designated representative and proxy. It is recommended that these articles be amended to reflect consistent language. It is recommended that the terms "in attendance" refer to those in the room of the assembly when the vote is brought forward, and that designated representative be changed to proxy in order to and be consistent with the rules of procedure for AFN assemblies. Chiefs received notice of this proposed amendment April 28, 2021, 60 days in advance of today, as required under the Charter. For your consideration, the following resolution is presented. Whereas, A, the Charter has inconsistencies related to the description of quorum for decision-making purposes. Wording in Article 2, Section 6, Principles, and Article 8, Section 1 creates ambiguity, and amendments are necessary to avoid any misunderstandings that could lead to conflict within the AFN assemblies. Therefore, be it resolved that the Chiefs in Assembly, 1, direct that Article 2, Section 6 should be amended to change the term designated representative to proxy representative. 2, be it further resolved that Article 8, Section 1 be amended to read, quorum will be established when a minimum of 51% of those chiefs and proxies registered for the assembly that are present in the assembly room. Decisions of the First Nations in assembly shall be made as far as possible by consensus or general agreement. When all efforts at achieving a consensus have been exhausted without success, a positive vote of 60% of the chiefs and proxy representatives of First Nations present in the assembly room shall be sufficient to constitute a decision. 3, be it further resolved that the AFN rules and procedures be amended to reflect the same language as the Charter, and that this amendment is effective immediately.
Thank you very much for that, Casey. And then, so as she notes, she did read through it. There's only the one whereas, and then it moves immediately to the therefore be resolved. And she did read through them as well. Let me just clarify that the mover and seconder are here. I do know that Chief Gould, the seconder, is here. I did not see the mover, Chief Leah George Wilson from Tsleil-Waututh First Nation, in the participants list. I just want to confirm that she's here. Otherwise, we will then look for a person to replace her as the mover. Second call for Chief Leah George Wilson as the mover of draft resolution 1. And third call for Chief Leah George Wilson. Not seeing her. Is there a chief or proxy who is willing to stand as the mover for this resolution? I'll ask for a raised hand. I see Councillor Dustin Rivers has raised his hands. I also want to thank Chief Henry Ogama Henry for offering as well. And so mover and second, and so let's make sure resolution's got that. And Councillor, just to verify that you are asking to be the mover. A quick thumbs up would be helpful on that, Councillor.
Yes, Chief Leah asked me to move this for her as we have a new chief, Jen Thomas, a relative from Tsleil-Waututh.
All right, thank you very much for that. And I want to compliment your dexterity and also doing the thumbs up on the screen as well. All right, so this has been moved and seconded and read into the record. Is there a need for discussion of this resolution to change the wording around the designated representative and the description of quorum? Second call is I see Ogama Wally Burns, Nathan Wright, and Mike Pilash McKenzie. Ogama Burns. Give him a moment. There you go. You are under.
Good afternoon. First and foremost, again, I'd like to thank the Creator for blessing us with a fine day. My concern in regards to the process that needs to happen, and why are we doing a charter change before an election? That's my question.
Yep. Procedurally, it says when a charter amendment is brought forward, it must be dealt with first, is what the rules say. And it is a part of the process which we have been doing over the last year or so. It's sort of leading into, let's call them the easy ones, and then medium ones, and then the harder ones. And so it is a part of that process. Ogima. Was there anything further, Ogima?
No, thank you. I just want to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you. Proxy Nathan Wright, Six Nations.
Thanks, Harold. Proxy Nathan Wright, proxy for Chief Mark Hill. Thanks for the resolution, but I do have one area of clarification, just further clarification as this resolution is trying to clarify things. We talk about in the first clause that designate the representative to a proxy representative. Is there a definition for proxy representative as well? And the reason I raise this is there an opportunity to include some wording in here to ensure that proxies for communities are from the community? I think that's an important aspect of the work that we do at the Assembly. Often I've seen proxies not even from the community, and from what I've seen is they were done. Those proxies don't necessarily reflect the nature of the community that they're purportedly representing, and maybe. And I'm not putting accusations out there, but maybe there's other political reasons for doing that. So just looking for clarification on a definition for a proxy representative. As myself, I'm from Six Nations, and I'm a counselor and I have proxy. Is there room to do some work around that and get that further clarification?
All right. As I recall, the charter there and the rules, there is no definition of proxy. It really just says that a proxy may be appointed, and it is in the control of the chief who that may be. And so there is no limitation. The only other limitation is that a proxy may not proxy. So those are the only provisions that I'm aware of, and I've noted that that's the advice that I'm receiving here. Were you proposing an amendment? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, at this time, I'll propose that proxy representative be inclusive of a definition that the proxy has to be from the community they're representing as well.
Okay, yeah, so maybe look to the mover and seconder whether that you want to add that language. And then, so first of all, to the mover and seconder and Chief Gould, to add that distinction that a proxy must be from the community of the First Nation. Chief Gould, I see you there.
Okay. Hello. Yeah, just for some further discussion on that. I think the problem with that is kind of a bit of an overreach on behalf of the Assembly of First Nation. I think the definition for the proxy representative is the due diligence on behalf of the chief or the proper representation. I think we were concerned about overreach. I think it's not up to us to set the parameters of who represents who at the First Nation. It's always about the First Nation representing themselves. So I think once you start adding language which adds definition, you're creating parameters and borders, which we felt was just a bit of an overreach.
Seconder does not agree to the amendment. Maybe look to the mover, Councilman. Do you agree to the amendment?
I concur with the comment issued by, and maybe additional. This resolution did go through the Chiefs Committee on Charter Renewal. It was seen as a sort of minor amendment to help clarify something that we felt was an oversight in the current wording of the rules, and that we were just attempting to clarify that. So our intention was to bring it here today as it we didn't think it would be a very controversial item, more so just clarifying and tightening language that is ambiguous at the current time. So I think the resolution should stand as is, probably just because this was the resolution that was sent out. And I actually don't know if staff can clarify the rules around charter amendments, because I know that we had to send this amendment out in a certain number of days in advance. I'm actually not sure if amendments to a charter amendment can be entertained or not. So.
And let's just double check on that. Mover and seconder do not agree to that amendment. Let us turn to Chief Mike McKenzie. I'm Mike Galash McKenzie, Chief McKenzie.
Oui, le Chick, bon après-midi à tous. Je suis ici depuis cet après-midi. Je regarde sur les modifications qu'on va effectuer sur la charte ou la réglementation. Je regardais juste le vote de cet après-midi par rapport si on voulait reporter le vote du chef national. On n'était même pas de 200. Est-ce qu'on a atteint le 60% ou le 51% pour déterminer si on allait à une élection au niveau national? Ça, c'est une chose qui me préoccupait. Puis demain, est-ce qu'on va atteindre à 60%? On est 200 aujourd'hui. On n'a même pas 60%. Je ne sais pas, au niveau des inscriptions de demain, est-ce qu'il y a une soixantaine de chefs qui se sont inscrits? Puis je me rappelle, je pense que c'était en Vancouver, il y avait beaucoup de proxys. C'était même pas des personnes qui étaient des politiciens. Fait qu'on était en élection. Oui, peut-être que le chef est responsable de la personne qui mandate pour aller voter. Mais j'ai trouvé à Vancouver, lors des votes, on a eu beaucoup de personnes qui avaient des cartes de proxy sur leur cou, à peu près 5-6 cartes pour voter. Fait que moi, j'ai trouvé ça ordinaire. Là, on devrait au moins minimum une personne par vote, là, et non si à 6 votes la personne. Moi, je trouve ça impartial là, par rapport à des votes, puis de changer ou de modifier à l'approche d'une élection. Je trouve pas ça juste au moment où on se parle. Fait que moi, je suis très préoccupé par rapport à la démocratie de l'APN. Est-ce qu'on va atteindre 60%? Je suis pas sûr demain. S'il y a 200 chefs qui votent demain de façon virtuelle, on n'a pas eu vraiment l'opportunité de voir des candidats puis d'être présent. Fait que moi, je trouve ça aberrant de prendre une décision demain encore à 200 personnes sur une possibilité de 650 communautés qui est représentée au niveau des conseils de banque. Fait que moi, c'est un questionnement là, que je me questionne depuis tantôt. Fait qu'on modifie puis qu'on change, mais on suit pas la charte actuellement. Moi, c'est une chose que je voulais mentionner à la table des chefs.
Thank you, Chief Palash. Just as a note, we did convene appropriately under our rules. We did pass a resolution to continue with the election consistent with our rules. And then there's still time before 2 p.m. Eastern tomorrow for the voting list to be register for that process. And that'll be a part of our discussion following these two resolutions. Thank you very much. I appreciate your concern there. Just looking at our speaker list, Regina Crowchild, please. Proxy Crowchild.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Harold. I'm going to vote against it because we never received any notice of any amendments to the charter prior to this resolution just coming up. So, and the other thing too is if you have, say, 20 chiefs at an assembly, 11 can pass a resolution, which is going to affect us. We have international treaties, and we cannot risk having people who don't have international treaties passing any resolutions on our behalf because we're the rights holders. So I don't agree with this. It's too dangerous. I don't want AFN to have a free reign just to do what they have to do because they're not a rights holder. It's the chiefs that represent the rights holders, and that's where it's got to stay.
Thank you very, very much, Regina. I'll just ask that the staff supporting the Charter Renewal Committee just to send me a note about the 60-day notice on this and just to get some clarification on that. Mary Jane Jim.
Thank you very much. I want to express my concern with the way in which this resolution is coming forward. As you heard from previous chiefs in the Yukon and British Columbia, not all of them have received full packages. Not all of them would have seen this charter amendment resolution. And as far as I understand, the Yukon has a minimum requirement. And if the charter is, Yukon would like to see a minimum requirement, pardon me, of 51% of those chiefs and proxies who are entitled to be registered. Meaning if you have 635 chiefs in Canada and 500 are registered or all are entitled to be registered, you need 51% in order for the charter to be changed and for business to proceed.
And
so we're recommending that change.
I'm
recommending that change. So I don't support the resolution as it currently stands, but I would recommend a change.
All right, and let's two clarifications then, Mary Jane. One, which community representative, just for the record, and two, the specific wording that you're looking for.
Okay, you broke up there. Sorry, it's technical difficulty. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, just the community you represent, just for the record, and then there's specific language that you're looking for that we could work with the resolutions committee on.
Okay, proxy for Koani First Nation,
awesome.
Yukon Territory. And the proposed amendment to the resolution, a minimum of 51% of those chiefs and proxies who are entitled to be registered for the assembly.
Okay, so and therefore be resolved in the second, number 2 in the second line, second sentence, after chiefs and proxies, add the words who are entitled to be registered. And I just watched making sure that the resolutions committee has that. So we
51% up there?
Entitled to be registered.
Yes.
Entitled to be. Thank you.
Thank you.
We check with the mover and seconder to make sure that that's an acceptable amendment. Just now we've clarified wording in place. Councilman and Chief Gould. I see Chief Gould shaking his head. Go ahead, Chief Gould.
Yeah, I think first of all, the general idea of the Charter Renewal Committee was to come up with ideas of including everybody without infringing upon their right. First of all, the Assembly First Nation is not a rights holder; it is a lobbying group, and I think that loses a lot of momentum. They represent the assemblies of chiefs, us as the chiefs. So the wording in this is worded specifically to allow the continuation of governance. This is all we've had the whole discussion, a long list of discussions over identity, treaty representation, who represents what. But the way the charter is written right now is problematic in itself. So this is the easiest, quick, simple solution. What this does is allows for the organization to continue to move forward. If you keep adding in words and stuff which limit and put parameters on, you won't be allowed to move forward with anything. The mandate of the charter was to come up with quick, easy solutions to make it better over a process. As was mentioned before, this is a stage process. It's the harder resolutions are pushed down the field. I think if we keep stonewalling ourselves, we'll never be able to move forward on this. So I'm going to have to disagree with the amendment in the sense that it is too limiting to moving the ball forward. It's a progressive idea of identifying to get to a quorum, and I think it is representative of all the people who want to be a part of a lobbying group. So I'll have to say no to the amendment.
Thank you. Councilman?
Yeah, I would concur. And Harold, I had asked for a clarifying question. I don't know if staff have been able to clarify. I don't know what the rules are for amendments to resolutions that are charter amendments, given the 60-day notice requirement. But also my suggestion, because I think some of the comments that are coming up, if staff could clarify what the current language is and why we are proposing the alternative language to this resolution. It's really about just clarifying where there is a gap in the current language of the charter, which is why this resolution. I think some of the issues that are coming up around the role of chiefs versus proxies, all of those issues, I think are separate matters that would need to come as separate proposals through a charter amendment proposal. This is really just about clarifying language that is not clear currently and trying to just gently amend it to make it a little bit clearer.
Yeah. And just on the clarification about, once the notice has been given and people arrive at the assembly does have the opportunity to make the amendments to a resolution changing the charter, and following significant like that. I'll just double check in terms of just a clarification. Yeah, so we weren't, I'll look to see if the staff are able to get in position to come on to speak to it, but just in terms of this language, it is not changing the percentage at this point. It is merely changing the clarification, and the distinction is this. From a chair's and a procedural perspective, the way it's read now is that our quorum is set by 50% plus one of registered on day one, which is a high number, and then on day 2 and 3 by what this says, which is 51% or plus one is how we use it. But just trying to clarify that we're going to use 51% of those present. So that's we're not changing percentages, we're just changing the clarification between day 1, day 2, and day 3. It's the way I would interpret this from looking at our charter and our rules. Let us then look to Calvin Sanderson for perhaps a near to final comment, and then I think the staff advisors to the Chiefs Committee on Renewal will be in a position to speak as well. Chief Sanderson?
Thank you, Harold, and to all the chiefs. I don't know if you can hear me at your end.
Yes, we can.
Thank you again, and thanks for our elders for doing the opening prayer and pipes, lifting of the pipes. I know in the past the chiefs have always selected their own proxies, whether they're a chief from another nation, and I think that was well practiced. When you say a proxy from your own community, you may have some difficulties when we were talking about assigning proxies due to the wildfires that's happening in BC. You know, the chiefs are entitled to proxy another chief, and it doesn't matter how many proxies that chief has. But if things are changing here, then, you know, I guess I'm not saying I don't support the resolution, but, you know, it's my first time seeing this one too. But, you know, if it's something to ease the proxies or the chiefs, then, you know, let's just go for it and see how it goes tomorrow. You know, we're ready here in Saskatchewan, and more or less we can't just keep going back and forth on resolutions. It's been a long day already, and I think it's going to be another longer day tomorrow to see what kind of results are going to happen. So, and always chiefs, I say you can ask them now.
Yeah, and I would just note that once we turn it over to the chief electoral officer, we're in the hands of the chief electoral officer and under the election rules and the online simply voting mechanism. And so quorum is not an issue tomorrow. And so this is just a clarification. I do, let's take Chief Ralph Leon's comment, and then we'll go to the staff for clarification. Chief Leon?
Good morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you are. Chief Ralph Leon Stales here. I like the discussions, and it's raises question, raises answers, and raises clarity all at the same time, because you know, when we were in Ottawa last can't remember when, in December, some winter, seemed like we never seen each other for a long time because of this pandemic that we're in. But, you know, when a chief wants to be heard and wants to have a vote, some things are okay just the way they are because last year I had my wife with me and she's a relative of the Sumas and Chiam First Nations, and they wanted say over there. So they phoned us over there and asked for her to be appointed as a proxy. We as independent chiefs have the right to appoint anybody that we wish and have confidence in them to be our voice for us. But only a chief can appoint. A chief and council here in Stales, we do it as a team, a chief and council. To appoint somebody to have voice for us. So, but I just wanted to raise that point as an independent tribe, UCM.
Thank you very much, Chief Leon. Let's go to the legal counsel for the AFN Chiefs Committee on Charter Renewal. Encore, I think we're going to organize to bring that Bonnie Leonard to the discussion.
Am I there now?
Can you hear you?
Great. So to answer the question about an amendment to a charter resolution on the floor, because Salem brought that up. So there's nothing within the charter currently that will guide us or govern us about amendments coming to the floor on a charter resolution that has already previously been given the 60 days required notice under Article 27. However, in the past, we have introduced charter amendments with the 60-day notice, and they have been amended by the chiefs, the First Nations in Assembly on the floor, and that was agreed to by the mover and seconder. So in this case, the proposed amendments have not been accepted by the mover and seconder, and therefore they can't be amended and included in the resolution. That's where we stand with that piece.
All right, thank you. Seeing no further hands raised for the discussion, I'll just make another call. Is there a need for further discussion? Otherwise, we will move to the question on this resolution as presented. Seeing none, therefore, let us call the question, and I'll ask that we open the voting poll. Okay, we'll just give it another 30 seconds. Okay, last call. Yeah, I know I'm moving this a little quicker, but only due to the lateness of the hour. Okay, it looks like it's fairly steady there. Let's take it up to 3 minutes, and then we'll close the poll at 3 minutes. Okay. All right. Let us close this poll and share the results. The motion carries. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Over to Winasiwi for the last resolution of the day.
Merci, Harold. Nous allons maintenant toujours nous diriger vers le prochain projet de résolution qui concerne la révision de la charte de l'APN. Et pour commencer, j'aimerais inviter le visionnement d'une présentation par Bonnie Leonard. Donc, si vous pouviez mettre le vidéo à l'écran, s'il vous plaît. Please put the video on. Thank you.
Resolution, composition change, Prince Edward Island. Hello, Chiefs and Proxies. My name is Bonnie Leonard. I've been working with the Chiefs Committee on Charter Renewal to develop amendments to the AFN Charter. The AFN Charter is one of the governing documents for AFN. At the 2019 AFN AGA, a resolution was passed directing AFN to work with Chiefs of PEI to prepare an amendment to the AFN Charter to change the composition under Article 17 to add PEI as its own region. Presently, PEI is a combined region with New Brunswick, represented by one regional chief at the Executive Committee of AFN. Notice for this amendment was provided to the chiefs to fulfill the requirement of 60 days notice under the Charter. For your consideration, the following resolution is presented. Whereas A, on July 25th, 2019, at the Annual General Assembly, the Chiefs passed Resolution number 72, 2019, that directed the Assembly of First Nations, AFN, to work with Chiefs of Prince Edward Island to prepare an amendment to Article 17 of the Charter to change the composition of the Executive Committee to allow for PEI Regional Chief. B, the Chiefs Committee on Charter Renewal has met to discuss Resolution 72, 2019, and the potential impacts to the AFN composition under the Charter, including organizational structure and financial budgets. Therefore, be it resolved that the Chiefs in Assembly, 1, direct that Article 17 composition and any other articles that refer to the number of regional chiefs be amended to include PEI as a region represented under the Charter.
You're muted, William.
Sorry for this. Merci, Bonnie. What is, okay. Sorry, Bonnie. Not sorry, Bonnie. Sorry, all. Merci, Bonnie, pour cette présentation. Nous allons maintenant présenter le projet de résolution et le titre qui a été présenté, c'est la Composition Change Prince Edward Island. I'm looking to see if the mover is present in the assembly. The mover is Chief Darlene Bernard, but I can already confirm that the mover, Chief Gold, is present. And I'm looking for, if you can please raise your hand, or Chief, okay, I can see you're there. thank you. And the draft resolution has been put into record since it has been read by Bonnie. So I'm opening the discussion period and giving a chance to the mover and the seconder to introduce their draft resolution if they want to speak. So mover and seconder, yes, Chief Gold, to you.
Great. Hello. Well, Alan, thank you. I'd like to take this opportunity to address the chiefs in assembly, albeit virtually. Unfortunately, I would have loved to walk around the room and explain why it's important to the Abequid First Nation and the Lennox Island First Nation, who represent a couple of thousand Mi'kmaq in Prince Edward Island. So I'd like to take the opportunity right now to give you a quick little snapshot of why it's important. This resolution that we put forward in 2019 was a continuation of one Chief Bernard and I put together like 20 years ago. This isn't something that, like the residential school survivors who are found in an unmarked grave, this isn't something that was new to us. This is something that is part of our history. So part of our history in the chiefs in the region of Prince Edward Island, which is a political province, we've never had the proper representation at the executive table. We were lumped in as some underneath New Brunswick. That's problematic in itself. Just being able to come up with an education package to get core funding from ISK on a 10-year plan, we were lumped under New Brunswick, and they would say, well, you just follow their criteria, you follow their plan. And we're like, no, we're completely different. We have a different set of provincial rules and regulations which guide us, and that's what we have to follow. So we had to think outside the box, and the only thing that allowed us to come up with a resolution was critical thinking. Prince Edward Island is based on tourism and seasonal employment, fisheries. We've traveled to the mainland to support our Mi'kmaq community members, as well as it affects British Columbia fishing as well. When our constitutional rights are being infringed upon by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans based on the Marshall decision backed up by the Supreme Court of Canada to give us the legal right to access a moderate livelihood, we went to the waterfront and we fought for our people's rights, which would have affected us across the nation from east to west coast. Our residential school issues are the same on the west coast as they are on the east coast. I don't understand why we don't have the political structure or the lobbying power the Assembly First Nation claims to have without giving us any proper provincial representation. So Chief Bernard and I, again, readdressed and put the resolution forward again today, and we're going to continue to ask for your support, that you give us the same respect and same dignity that was denied our people in residential schools, was denied our provincial over the years of colonialism. Why are we continuing to misrepresent our First Nations on Prince Edward Island who have a provincial representation to represent themselves? This is a call for other First Nations in the community who are struggling with their own territorial recognition. I appreciate that. I understand that. Last year, when the pandemic hit the First Nations, I was in Ottawa, and with my counterpart, Chief Bernard, we were ready to meet at the First Minister's meeting. We were at that table. We have the provincial representation. We just don't have the executive representation of the Assembly of First Nations. It makes no sense to me. In the time that I've been trying to do this, I'm saying we can lobby for First Nations. I can be an advocate for our residential school issues. I can be an advocate for our treaty rights. I can be at the First Minister's meeting with my Premier from the province of Prince Edward Island, and I can address our issues and be an advocate for our people. But I'm not given that respect from the Assembly of First Nation. I'm not even represented on the executive committee. And I will say this, the problem that it's having is getting the proper representation would be monetary. I think the monetary value on representation of a First Nation is just, it's a slap in the face to leadership. So I call upon the chiefs, give me the power and the authority to represent my people. My chief and I, Chief Bernard and Chief Gould of the Abequid First Nation and Lennox Island First Nation represent the thousands of Mi'kmaq in our territory. Give us the provincial respect to represent ourselves. This is a lobbying organization which claims to represent First Nations. Represent us properly and give us the authority to represent ourselves. Lalio.
Thank you, Chief. Chief Bernard, the floor is yours. If you can unmute yourself. Chief Bernard, okay.
Good evening on this end of the country. I just want to say I ditto everything that Chief Gould just said. I just want to say that I feel strongly that as PEI Abequid, as a province, I think that we have a lot of value to add to the national voice. And I really hope that the Chiefs in Assembly will allow us to have that voice at their table. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this. I now open the discussion period to the entire delegation. Is there a need for discussion, or do you have any proposed amendment for draft resolution number 2, which is entitled Composition Change, Prince Edward Island? I don't see any hand raised. Looking, I now call on Chief King to come and speak to the Assembly microphone. To you, Chief King. You're muted at the moment.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make a commentary. You know, when we looked at the AFN renewal, I was always under the assumption that we were going to look at true nationhood. And how we're structured at the AFN is through provincial boundaries. And perhaps that's the only way we could organize ourselves at this stage because of confederation. And I don't agree with that. You know, for myself, the Anishinaabe people occupied territory, mostly in Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and parts of Alberta, Quebec, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and that's the Anishinaabe Nation. That's the Anishinaabe territory. One of the largest and most powerfulest nations north of the Mexican border. And what I see, what we're doing in this process is that I support the resolution in principle, but I see how we're manifesting ourselves under provincial guidelines. And to me, I think we're taking a step backward. And I would like to see the organization change where obviously there might be problems with having representation on the Anishinaabe Nation at that level, but that is the Anishinaabe Nation. We're broken down into different treaty areas, which could be a subgroup of that. But I just want to make a comment on that. To me, I don't agree with the provincial designations of our organizations. Even in Ontario, we're bound by a provincial boundary, which shouldn't be. We signed international agreements with the British Crown. We are sovereign nations, and yet we seem to capitulate to the sovereignty of Canada, and by doing so, we're doing it, I guess, inadvertently through provincial boundaries. So I just want to make a comment on that. But I support the representation that you're asking, but it's just something to consider. And I'm hoping that the AFN renewal would look at some of those much broader issues. If we're going to talk about international status and we're sovereign nations, we have to look at the composition of our communities prior to the advent of colonialism. Miigwech.
Thank you, Chief King. I now call upon Chief Wright to come to the microphone. Chief Wright, to you.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And it's proxy Wright, Councillor Nathan Wright, Six Nations of the Grand River Territory, proxy for Chief Mark Hill. Very similar comments to Chief King around the composition and where we're going in that long term. And I know as we go further down the path of restructuring, we'll get to that nation discussion, because I think that's so fundamentally important. And I also agree with this resolution in principle, and really, commend the chiefs and the First Nations in Prince Edward Island, and definitely acknowledge the work that you've done over the last 20 years. But at the same time, we need to start beginning that discussion, because I've been a part of this assembly for about 2 decades now, and we talk. We talk about going down the nationhood path, and we have to get to the action end of things. So I certainly support Chief King's comments as well around let's get to work on ensuring that how we want to be represented at the executive is how we are going to be represented. I know in our approach, the Iroquois Caucus has met a number of times. We've developed a process within ourselves, and that's the kind of nation approach that I'm seeking and having that seat at the executive table at that level. Again, just supporting Chief King's comments, but also in principle, definitely support the work that you guys have done in Prince Edward Island going forward. So thank you, and definitely support the resolution.
Thank you, Proxy Wright. Is there a need for further discussion on draft resolution number 2? If you wish to address the assembly, please raise your hand using the Zoom function, and I now call upon Chief Miracle to come to the microphone to you.
You'll have to unmute me. Thank you. I support the resolution, and I'm going to call a question.
Thank you, Chief Miracle. Question has been asked. I can see that there was only one hand raised. I propose to give this a moment to copy to Chief Wilson, and then we'll go to the vote. So Chief Wilson, to you.
Hi, yeah, sorry, I've been monitoring that wildfire call and also trying to be on this call. So it's very hard for a lot of our BC chiefs trying to deal with all of this at once. I just wanted to say, I put in the chat, I was hoping to have clarification on if that by doing this resolution, if it would actually provide three Atlantic regional chiefs to the executive. And then I was wondering if this resolution is speaking about equal representation. In BC, we have over 204 nations, and we only have one regional chief. So if you're talking about equality and, how do we do that? And I heard about the sovereignty as well. And how does it create more solidarity if that's the case then? So I just wanted clarity on that because we only have one regional chief for our 204 communities and the nations here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Wilson. And I will now turn the floor over to Chief Gold that would like to address. I think I understood from your to you.
Thank you. That's a real good point. I think part of the problem that the previous two comments are something that the charter is going to address. It is a complicated issue of representation about who represents what territory and how are we colonial divided by provincial boundaries and stuff like that. We all agree. It's a longer process for the charter renewal to come up with a better resolution about proper representation. Is about per capita. That whole discussion has happened and will continue to happen. I think what we're trying to put forward is an idea that the existing formula, the way things are designed right now, are flawed, and it's like a constitutional charter flaw. It's based on the way they are. The flags that are flagged and the executive are standing there are short our flag. Our representation. I think that's all we're asking for is a fair and equal representation. I will be an advocate for the proper change and to inclusion of a change down the road as it comes. But all we're asking is that Prince Edward Island be at the table and given the respect and included in that decision-making process, because our treaties will be affected by decisions made on Prince Edward Island, and our decisions and actions will affect Canada right across the board equally. So I think we should all be at the same table. I'm an advocate for regional representation. I'm an advocate for a change to the charter right off the get-go. That's why I sit on the committee. So on behalf of us and PEI, we just look for your support to allow us to continue to be a voice for our people that don't have a voice. And unfortunately, in this format that we're in right now, we all inherited, PEI doesn't have a voice. So, Valio, thank you all.
Merci, Chef Gold. Alors, la question a été demandée. J'ai autorisé la dernière main levée qui avait déjà été levée par Chef Wilson. On a eu la réponse du Chef Gold et il n'y a aucune modification. J'ai déjà mentionné que nous allions passer au vote. Alors, c'est ce que nous allons faire. Je dois suivre le protocole Alors, je demande maintenant l'ouverture du vote, s'il vous plaît. Please put the voting screen. La fenêtre du vote est maintenant devant vous. Vous êtes priés de voter si vous le souhaitez. C'est maintenant le temps de voter pour le projet de résolution numéro 2 qui est intitulé en français changement de composition concernant l'île du Prince-Édouard. Alors, c'est un changement à la charte et c'est en train d'être voté. Comme on l'a déjà mentionné à quelques reprises, si vous perdez, si la fenêtre de vote se ferme et que vous n'avez pas encore enregistré votre vote, c'est possible d'ouvrir la fenêtre à nouveau en cliquant sur le bouton poll, sondage en français, dans le bas de l'écran de Zoom. Alors, je vois que les chefs et mandataires continuent toujours de voter. Alors, merci pour cela. Nous allons encore attendre un peu pour permettre à tout le monde d'avoir la chance de prendre le temps de voter sur le projet de résolution numéro 2 tel que présenté. Et je vais immédiatement mentionner à l'équipe que je vais avoir besoin d'aide pour le calcul sur les votes pour s'assurer que la règle de 60% des votes positifs confirme qu'un projet de résolution passe et ce 60%-là ne doit pas contenir les abstentions. Alors, je vais demander l'aide après. Je vais laisser encore 1 minute au vote. Alors, 1 minute, il reste 1 minute pour la période de vote pour le projet de résolution numéro 2. And I'm not sure if if our team catch what I just said in French, but I will need help to count the voting results whenever the vote will be closed. Thank you. We have 30 seconds left for the voting on the draft resolution number 2. Alors, la période de vote est maintenant terminée pour le projet de résolution numéro 2. S'il vous plaît, pourriez-vous afficher les résultats préliminaires du vote à l'écran? Thank you. Alors, nous avons devant nous les résultats partiels du vote qui ne comprennent pas les votes par téléphone. Alors, nous avons les votes qui sont favorables, donc pour 70%, 80 personnes ont voté pour, contre, against, 25%, 28 personnes et 6 personnes se sont abstenues de voter, donc ont partagé leur abstention. Alors, ceci représente les résultats partiels du vote. Nous allons vous confirmer Nous allons confirmer les résultats officiels lorsque possible, mais pour le moment, pour le moment, nous voyons que le 60% a été atteint dans les résultats que l'on voit à l'écran. Alors, si, dépendamment du résultat final pour les votes par téléphone, normalement, j'annoncerai que le projet de résolution numéro 2, intitulé « Changement de composition concernant l'île du Prince-Édouard », serait adopté sous réserve du vote final. Merci. On peut enlever maintenant l'écran de vote. Please close this voting screen. Et merci beaucoup, chef et mandataire. Et je vais maintenant donner la parole à mon collègue Cédric. À toi.
Well, Alan Weena, thank you very much. So it's been a big day for us co-chairs and especially for you guys as chiefs and proxy. Our section of the day is coming to an end. We will then pass it on to our chief electoral officer. But before we do, I'd like to make a few announcements. So the first one is that the deadline for late resolution is tomorrow, July 7th at 12 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So just saying that any late resolutions can be submitted and will then be validated by or looked at by the executive to see if we bring them to the floor or not, if they are moved on to another assembly or brought to the executive directly. There's also going to be the Circle of Trade in a virtual format tomorrow between 10 and 1 p.m. Eastern, which would make it, if my math is correct, 7 to 10 Pacific. So anywhere you find yourself between those times, there will be a Circle of Trade. You have all that information in your package or else it's on the website. And finally, for the AFN sector updates, we'll try to get the videos played during the days that are upcoming. But if we don't, just to inform you that they are all available on the AFN webpage. So for those of you who want to hear from the AFN sectors, that is where you can get them. So for that, we are coming to an end on our side, like I said. So I would like to introduce you to Ron Lawfer, the Chief Electoral Officer, who was named during the December election, or the December Assembly, I'm sorry. And once this happens, the election process will be begun. So Ron, the Assembly is yours.
Thank you, Cedric. While some of you may know me from previous elections, many of you don't, but I hope one day we can meet in person. I live in unceded Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh territory, and I'm very honored to be administering this important election. I've had the pleasure to have worked with Loretta Pete Lambert, who has been the special advisor on this election, and I thank her for all her work and insight for this election. Obviously, this year's election is being held online, and I'd like to provide you a little bit of information on how that will work. Also, I just sent out a test ballot for the national chief election. So chiefs and proxies can do a practice round during the upcoming break. You will receive the email now to access the test ballot. If you need assistance, please go ahead and call the voting helpline. It's important you complete this test ballot to ensure you're familiar with the voting process and can troubleshoot any technical difficulties now rather than tomorrow. If you don't complete the test vote, our staff will be following up with you tonight. And we'll be doing our best to follow up with you around 7 o'clock or so. We will be using Simply Voting for the election. It is a Montreal-based company that has been providing online voting services for almost 20 years. I've used Simply Voting myself for years because it's an easy system for voters to use and it's secure. It's also audited and tested by a variety of international bodies, which is critical for online voting infrastructure. Importantly, it also allows for telephone voting. For those of you that want to vote by phone tomorrow, or even in the test vote tonight, you will need to use your PIN code and call that phone number that is included in the emails sent out by Simply Voting. if you don't have access to your email, you will need to call our help desk where they can assist you to get that PIN code. Most of you will be voting online, and I'm going to take 3 minutes now just to show you what that looks like. So I'm just going to share my screen here and show you exactly what you will be seeing. So the email will look like this. That's what you will have received in your email just now. And for me, it says test voter. Yours will say your name. It gives you a little bit of information about what the election is. You can see here it's a test, and there's fictional candidates for you to choose from. It also says you need your status card number or the ID number you registered with, and you need your PIN code. Your PIN code is in the email, and there was, for those registered yesterday, you received an email with the PIN code as well. This test vote will only go out to those who are registered at this point. When you are ready, you can click on the link to vote. And as well here, you can note the phone number to cast a ballot. You'll need the same information to vote via phone. So if you're linking through the online system, you'll click on this link. It will take you to the login page, and you'll put in your status card number or other ID number you registered with. Please remember to remove any spaces or dashes. You should only be putting in the numbers or letters that are in your ID number. So for me, it's just that, and then the PIN code, I can never remember the PIN code, so I pop back to my email and see it's 80069. You can copy and paste it if that's easier for you, and you can log in. I should also note that this entire process is available both in English and in French, and the language buttons are at the top. They're available earlier in this process as well, but everything is in both languages. At this point, you have your ballot in front of you, and we just have a few serials to choose from. So you just choose the person you want to vote for by putting a click next to the box of the candidate you're choosing. You can only select one. As well, you can find the bio and photo on any of the candidates by clicking on the link, and you will find a biography and photo, and you don't have to open them. You can, whatever you wish. Once you choose the candidate, I'm going to choose Rice Krispies here. You click continue. When you finish that, you get to your confirmation page, and this is your last chance. So if you are certain that Rice Krispies is your choice, you would click confirm. If you realize you made an error, you will click change, and it'll take you back to that previous page. But Rice Krispies is the choice that I would like to make. So I'm clicking confirm, and that takes us through to the end of that process with the online vote. It's very similar with the telephone vote. You put in the same information, and an automated system will take you through the process. Now, in a moment, we are going to have a health break. I think that you've had a long up period, and I want to encourage you to cast your test vote during that break. And we will come back from that break. Well, I think, Cedric, do we have a defined time for the break, or are we going to say that we're about 10 minutes? We'll come back to that in a moment. When we come back from break, we'll conduct the all candidate open forum, and we'll go through the candidate finance piece as well as the candidate forum. So please remember